The team has been so fired up for this. I cannot tell you guys how, they've been talking about it nonstop for weeks on end. And again, I say this at a lot of the summits, but there is no place I would rather be than here with you guys. I do like my wife and kids, but it's a close race with that. So, but no, we're super fired up. And after the workout yesterday, the people that we were at Proven for like 5 hours on Thursday, and we were like, I don't think that many people are going to show up. And Mitch was like, hey, it's 105. And I was like, 105 people? All right, here we go. We'll see how this works out. But we're super excited. But yesterday, where's Mike Nickel? Right there. Apache CrossFit, Toms River, New Jersey, right? After the workout, he grabbed me and said, hey, it's really cool what you guys have built. And I just kind of reflected on it for a minute, and I was like, well, we didn't actually do that. You guys did that. Right? Jay's right. We are two knuckleheads that started a podcast. Okay, and to give him credit, he likes to get out of a lot of work, but he'll always show up and record a podcast, no matter what's going on, no matter how busy we are, no matter how tired we are. He's always like, let's go. And he's done that time and time again. He's not the most reliable person I know, but he's pretty reliable. Okay. But it's important. You guys have the same vision that we have, which is like we can make an impact on the world doing this thing called CrossFit. And it's really, really important that we all get on the same page about that, but understand that that's not us. Our job and what we see our role as is just to provide the forum for that to happen. Because you guys see the same thing that we saw when we started in 2007, 2008, which is this stuff is impactful, right? And there's a very specific way that we want to do that. And that's what we're going to talk about today. And I was really happy that Mike brought that up yesterday because it dovetails perfectly into what I had already dialed up. And what was it I think 2 weeks ago, because rarely do Jay and I actually talk business. We talk about a bunch of nonsense. And he was like, I've got a theme for the weekend. He's like, it's, carry water, chop wood. And then I was telling him what mine was. And I was like, it's 10 lessons. And he was like, dude, this is perfect. And I was like, it's like we're finishing each other's sandwiches, right? But it's important, it's important that we both had the same mindset going into the weekend and what we wanted to achieve here, because a lot of what we're going to talk about this weekend, we're going to talk about strategy and tactics, but a lot of what we're going to be talking about is impact. And if you want to be really successful at anything in life, you should aim for impact. How can I positively impact the most people that I possibly can, doing the thing that I love the most? And that's the beauty of this whole thing. I feel like the luckiest person alive that I get to wake up every morning and do something that I love so much, that has so much impact. And that's what we're going to talk about here today. So, why are you guys doing this? This is really important. There's a huge swath of affiliate owners in this room. So, raise your hand if you are under a 2-year affiliate owner. Cool. Raise your hand if you're 5 or less. Raise your hand if you're 8 or less. If you're 10 or less. Raise your hand if you're over 10. Fuck yeah. So what I want to outline today is, some of you know why you do this, right? Some of you have figured out, you've been doing it long enough, and you get it. Some of you are kind of in a rocky area in this whole process, which is not weird, by the way. You just need a little bit of a reminder. Be like, okay, I remember, I get it now. And then some of you who are a little bit newer to the game don't really know yet. But by the end of this weekend, everybody in this room will understand what it is that you're trying to do. I promise you that. Okay. So what I'm going to talk about today is what I call the ripple. And I'm going to work through this in a couple different ways, and I talk about this at the end of every seminar, but what we're going to talk about is what is your impact on the world and how does that go forward past you? And how we're going to do that is we're going to talk about 10 lessons I learned from my coach. So in 1959, that turd over there on the left took over Cuba, instituted communist dictatorship. And that's where my dad was living at the time. He was living in Las Tunas, Cuba, right? And they kind of looking around and looking at the landscape, and they're like, I don't think this is going to work out. Okay. So he's the oldest of 3 kids. Him and his dad hop a plane. They fly to Mexico, start to make that journey, moving through. They get to the Rio Grande, and him and his dad, he's about 8 years old at this point. His dad says, hey, you go that way, I'm going to go this way, go find the Border Patrol. And I think about that a lot. I'm like, 8 years old, go that way, figure it out. Okay. Something interesting about having a parent that's an immigrant. Context is king. So a lot of times, if I'm having a hard time, I just imagine my dad talking to him, and I'm like, having a hard time. And he's like, did you have to walk across the Rio Grande? Good point, I'll get back to work. Okay. And we're all gonna go through that, right? And the important part here is, you don't always have to know where you're going. You just have to keep walking. Whether you're new to the affiliate game, whether you're old, you're gonna have to do things that you're not entirely sure where the end state is. This whole thing is fluid. The map doesn't have to be accurate for you to continue moving on the journey. You're gonna start projects, you're like, I don't know if this is gonna work. We're gonna ask you to do things without necessarily always giving you the outcome at the end, okay? Just keep walking. I promise you, the only thing that will happen is eventually you will get where you wanna go. After they moved to the States, a couple years after that, the oldest of 3 kids, his mom leaves, so she abandons the family. He's the oldest of 3 kids, has to kind of take over that role. Okay. Has his aunt kind of start to have to figure that out. He's about 12 years old. Okay. And then eventually starts to grow into that leadership role, takes care of his little brother, his sister, and then eventually, obviously turns out to have a pretty good life, to be honest with you. Okay. But again, thinking about that too, the key here is this. There are times in our lives that you are going to go without a guide. Okay. You have to learn to guide yourself, okay, particularly in this game of business. Okay. You must learn to guide yourself. There is not always going to be someone there to tell you the answers. That's not how it works. What you have to understand about that was given to you. And the other thing you have to understand about that is that period of time has an expiration date on it. It will end. Okay? So when you're going through those times and you feel like you don't know what you're going, remember number 1, keep walking. I'll figure it out. I'll learn to make those corrections as I go. Okay? Learn to guide yourself, because the gift that you're going to be able to give somebody else later on down the road, immeasurable. Okay? You need to learn to guide yourself. It's a funny joke in our family. So my dad met my mom. They were about 15 years old. They met in high school. And he would always go over to my mom's house. So he had a family of 3. My mom grew up in a family of 6 kids. And obviously, English wasn't his first language. So he would just kind of walk in and had this big room. The kitchen was off to the left and this big, gigantic table there. And he would just kind of lean on the wall in the kind of foyer there, walking in the back door. And he would never say anything. Right? He would just literally just lean on the wall for like hours on it, to the point where like people would forget he was in the room, right? And so we'd be like, hey, where's Elmo? His name is Elmo, by the way. And I was almost Elmo the third, if we should talk about that. I'm glad that's not the case. And my grandmother, her name was Patricia, but we called her Nanny. She'd be like, yeah, he was over there holding up the wall. He's just always over there holding up the wall, just all the time, right? Consistent, okay? And that brings up the third lesson, which is 50% or more of life is just showing up. Sometimes you don't have to do anything. Sometimes you don't have to say anything. You just got to show up. You just have to show up. It's not always going to be glamorous. It's not always going to be sexy. Much of it is just going to be mundane and feel like Groundhog's Day. But you got to show up. Because sometimes winning looks like just showing up. And I was trying to think about how to define winning. And this is what I came up with. Winning is doing 1,000 small actions that nobody sees so that you can do something once and people will see it. Okay? Show up. Lean on the wall. Right? Just like when you guys don't want to go to the gym or fill out that spreadsheet, show up anyway. Coach cancels in the 6 a.m. You get that text at 6:05. You're like, motherfucker. Right? You got to show up. Okay? If you do that long enough, and you do it for a long enough period of time, and you're consistent, you will get the outcome you're looking for. You just got to show up. I kind of take notes and I put just random thoughts in Twitter sometimes, or X, or whatever the fuck we're calling it now. And I put something in the other day. I was like, be the motherfucker who everybody knows is going to show up no matter what. That makes you one of the most valuable people in any room. Be that person. No matter what, hell, high water, chaos, no matter what, show up standing tall and be like, I'm here. Let's get to work. Okay. When my dad got into high school, he decided he wanted to play football. They were pretty poor at the time, and he's like, well, I'm going to need cleats for this. So on his way to school one day, he's like, I don't know where I'm going to find cleats. I can't afford them. It's like, takes a leap into a dumpster, literally dumpster diving, pulls out 2 cleats. He's like, ready to go. Yeah. Plays that whole season. They end up winning a state championship. His senior year, to this day, says is the greatest football team in Florida high school history, but I don't know, who knows. But that freshman year, when he got those cleats, he played that whole season on 2 left cleats. Okay, 2 left cleats. My son thinks that's, easy to do. Kids, I'm like, hey, your shoes are on the wrong feet. He's like, no, they're not. And I'm like, I'm not going to argue with you. Okay. But I think about that all the time, and what's important about that is when we look at what we're working, even the most imperfect tools will allow you to do the work. And this happens to us a lot, by the way. Raise your hand if you put off a project because you don't have the right software or that spreadsheet's not done. Raise your hand if you're putting something off because hey, I'll do it when I get the right tool. Everybody raise your fucking hand. Okay. Okay. You don't need the perfect tool. That's not how it works. You just have to start. Okay? Work that tool. So when we give you that spreadsheet and you're like, oh, I'm not really a spreadsheet person. I'm like, great, fill it out anyway. Right? Well, I'm going to get this sorted out and I'm going to get better reports when I move from push press to Wodify or whatever we're going to do. And I'm like, cool story, figure it out now. Okay? You do not need the perfect tool to get where you need to go. And I would argue that learning to use imperfect tools gives you a massive advantage on everybody else. I don't need perfect tools, man. Give me anything and we'll get it done. Okay? You don't need the fancy stuff. You just need to be resourceful with what you have. This is where the stories get funny. Every summer, my dad was a basketball coach, if you guys didn't know. Played Division I. Does anybody not know that? Me? Yeah. In case Jay hasn't told you guys. None in college, just in high school. We would repaint the gym floor. So we would strip the floor. It would take a couple weeks, strip it down. We'd repaint it. We'd have to varnish it. And it was this big ordeal. And it was a big deal for my dad. So in middle school, I'm out there helping him. And so we're taping the lines very meticulously so that we can paint the gym floor, make those perfect angles and all that stuff. And I'm over there just making these janky-ass lines, right? And he starts making his way over to me, and I'm like, oh, shit, here it comes, right? And he's like, it's not a straight line. He's like, for those of you who don't know, basketball court is 50 feet, sideline to sideline. It's not 49 feet. It's not 50 and a half. It's 50. And I was like, what does it matter? I was like, it's straight enough, right? And some of you guys have heard this saying. It's like, hey, You're either stupid or you don't give a shit, and I can only help you with one of those. Okay? Now, here's the important part about that, which is like seems a little bit harsh. Okay? And to be very candid with you, I probably didn't figure that part out until about 5 to 10 years ago. Okay? When he told me that, I was like, that's pretty aggressive. Okay? But yeah, he's either stupid or you don't give a shit, and I can only help you with one of those. And the important part about that is this: being either one is a choice. Again, don't kid yourself into having all of these excuses. Be like, hey, I'm not a numbers guy, right, or gal. That's a choice. Okay. Well, that's not really something I care about right now. That's a choice. And the beauty of that choice is you can choose not to be stupid. You can choose to learn things. I think the statistic is spending about 8 hours on any task to try to master, or 18 hours to master anything will put you in the top 5% of whatever that thing is. Okay? So if you don't know something, which many of you don't, just like me, figure it out. Go learn. Okay? Because if you don't, understand you've chosen not to be better. And I don't think any of you guys are sitting here having made that choice. Okay? So again, just ask yourself, am I stupid or do I not care about this? Pick one and fix it. And if you don't want to trust me, guys, trust John Wayne. All right? Life is already hard. It's harder if you're stupid. When I was in middle school, I was playing basketball already. And my dad was a high school basketball coach for 36 years, I think. And I had shown some promise up to that age. I was like, oh, he might be pretty good. Not a real bright kid, but he can play basketball. And during the summer leagues, my dad would coach summer league games and all that kind of stuff. And he would be like, hey, I'm going to throw you into some of these games. Right? So I'm like 6th, 7th grade. And he starts throwing me into some of those games with high schoolers, right? So I'm about 12, 13, playing with some guys that are going into college at that point. And I'd get real nervous before going to the game. He's like, hey, do 2 things. Defend, run the play. Don't try to do anything else. Play defense, run the play. Got it. And I'd step out onto the floor, playing with older guys, and it would feel like your feet were stuck to the floor. Like the game just felt so fast. You're like, oh my God, what is happening? Like everybody was bigger, they were faster, they were picking on me because I was little. You just throw me out there, right? And that happened multiple times in my career. It happened when I was going from middle school to high school. It happened when I made the transition from high school going to prep school. And it happened again going from prep school into college. Every single time. It was like, God, like it's just everything was so fast. It couldn't process the information fast enough. But show up, you keep working on it, and eventually it starts to slow down just a little bit. You can start to anticipate. You can start to read people. You can start to think about other things other than like, what the fuck is happening right now? Okay? And it's the same in business, right? It's the same journey that all of you are on, right? And some of you guys are doing a really good job, and then you get to another level. I had about 3 or 4 conversations last night. You're like, hey, things are going well, and I kind of don't know what to do. And I'm like, it's the same thing. You're at a different level now, right? The game starts to speed up. The problems become more complex, right? The vision becomes bigger, right? Just understand, it takes time for you to catch up on the speed, okay? But you got to stay in the game, okay? Eventually, you'll start to anticipate. Eventually, you'll start to understand what's happening and have a better understanding of the knowledge of the craft and strategically what you should be doing, okay? But understand, if you feel uncomfortable because things are moving too fast and there's too many moving parts and the team's getting bigger and the communication is breaking down, good. That means you're at a different spot now. Play with people that are out of your league. There's little to be gained by being the best person in the room. Continue to seek out rooms like this. Continue to find people that are doing things significantly better than you are. I don't mean a little bit. Find people that make you feel inadequate. It's important. The things that you will learn by being around those people is like the fast forward button in life. If you're the smartest person in the room, you are in the wrong room. Get out. Telling people the truth and making someone cry is better than telling a lie and making someone smile. My freshman year, I started all 4 years in high school. The first game I ever played in, I scored 25 points. Thank you. I appreciate that. And my dad and I, we'd had several conversations leading up to that. And he was like, hey, listen, like, understand, you're the coach's son. A lot of people don't like that. So the knives are going to be out. Right? Understand, like, there's a different expectation for you because people don't think you should be here. Right. Cool. 25 will shut that conversation down. Okay. After game, walking back to the bus, puts his arm around me and says, hey, played great tonight. Good job. A couple games later, pretty mediocre game, lots of turnovers. Going back to the bus, puts his shoulder around me, and I'm like, he's going to give me some words of encouragement. He says, hey, you really suck today. I was like, damn, okay. And I sat on that for a little bit, and a couple days later, he's like, hey, listen, I'll be the first person to tell you when you're good, I'll be the first person to tell you when you're bad, but I'm always going to tell you the truth. I'm always going to tell you the truth. And that single interaction changed our dynamic for years. Because I knew whether he was telling me, he's like, hey, great job, keep going, or he's like, that was garbage, I knew what he was telling me was accurate. And this is important. For those of you guys that are struggling developing your teams, this is probably the problem. Okay? You're struggling having that hard conversation to say, hey, Maria, that was not great. Okay? Or hey, Jay, great fucking job. Okay? Jay and I were at a mastermind in Colorado last week, and one of the topics that came up was in great organizations, talking about culture, there's a ratio of 6-to-1 positive interactions versus negative. And in the worst organizations, there's a 3-to-1 negative to positive. So think about that. You know, there's a difference between when you get a call from the boss and you're like, fuck, what now? Or the boss is like, hey, can you swing by? Oh, yeah, I'd love to swing by. Like, what are we going to talk about? Right? The difference between those two is somebody who's telling you the truth all the time. So if that's you and you're trying to build a team and you're trying to build culture, understand what that's going to entail. You're going to have a lot of hard conversations. Okay? You're going to have to tell people the truth. You're going to tell them when they're not doing a great job. Okay? Those are hard because a lot of people have never had that conversation before. How many of you guys have been on a call with me or somebody else or give us some information? I'm like, that's not great. Yeah, that's our job, right? But the thing there is you can make it better. But if we start off from a bad place of me or anybody else who's working with you telling you something that is not accurate, you can see how this is not going to be a fruitful relationship. Okay? Have those hard conversations. No matter how hard it is, tell people the truth. They deserve the opportunity to get better and stretch themselves. Those conversations are not easy. Where's Cassidy? Back there. Cassidy's been my partner in crime at CrossFit Rife for 10 years. 10 years. He's a GM there now. We've had many hard conversations. I am sure we will have many more. And I can tell you, I look forward to none of them. But the relationship that we've garnered over the last 10 years is he can come in and he can say, hey, that's not, you messed that up. And I can go and talk to him and I can say, hey, we need to think about how we respond to people when they send emails like that. Like, that's not the best response. Okay? That's how you get better. Tell them the truth.
If you're enjoying this content, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Also, if you're interested in what we do in Affiliate University, there's going to be a link somewhere around this video. Book a call. We'd love to talk to you about how we can help you build a better box.
This is my favorite story. Okay? That's a participation trophy. My senior year, we are playing a game that is so atrocious that probably doesn't even qualify as basketball. And the game's over. We go into the locker room, and Elmo is not pleased, shall we say. And he is MFing us up and down the locker room, right? And one of the younger guys, he's a little frustrated, puts his hand up. Don't ever do that. It's like, Coach, I just want to have fun. At which point, a couple of the seniors in the group are like, they're like, hey, you should probably shut the fuck up now. And, my dad, with great disdain, pauses, takes a breath, and he looks at the group and he says, fun? Fun? Fuck fun. He's like, you know what's fun? Winning is fun. He goes, so if you don't want to win, get out. And that set the tone. I was like, he has a point. Okay. Winning is fun. Play to win. Okay. Now, this is really important. Many of us, as we work through this whole process, at first you get into the game just to be in the game. Okay? And if you want to, play the infinite game, understand that winning looks different depending on what it is that you're doing. Okay? Play to win. And for some of you, that means that you're going to have to use whatever you have to make that happen. Meaning whether you're resentful, whether you're angry, whatever it is. But some of you need to play angry. You need to get up every morning and you need to be okay with being mad that you're not doing as well as you should be doing. And you need to use that and take your ass to work and fix it. Okay? But play to win. When you show up and you say, hey, winning is defined as this for me, it changes how you show up to work. It changes how you interact with your staff. It changes how you interact with the people that come into your box to change their lives. Play to win. Winners win, right, Jay? Okay. Play to win. This is also a good one. 1999, I graduated high school. I went to the Naval Academy Prep School. And prior to that, you do a 4-week NDOC session, which was the last hard session they had in 1999. Everything was easy after that. And in that time, they just treat you like garbage while you're there. It's like a mini condensed boot camp. And you get one phone call during that 4-week period. Okay. So one of the cadre comes in, wakes me up. It's about 6 in the morning on a Saturday. I'm not expecting this dude to come in. He was a Coast Guard guy. I still remember, blonde hair. He's like, Fernandez, get up. I was like, oh shit, am I in trouble again? He's like, you got your phone call. I'm like, sounds a lot like prison. Walk out into the hall and there's a string of phones up there. It's a payphone. It's like, go in there, dial the number. 6 in the morning. I know for a fact my parents are not awake at this point. I'm like, I'm not going to talk to anybody, but I'm going to pretend. So I dial. And my dad picks up the phone. I'm like, oh shit. I don't even know what to do at this point. I'm like, he picked up the phone. He's like, hello? And I'm like, this place sucks. All they do is yell at me. I don't want to, this is bad. I'm not going to make it out here. I want to come home, blah, blah, blah. Click. The cadre hung up the phone. He was like, you're done. They know you're alive. Go back to your room. So in that whole conversation, I haven't talked to my parents. All my dad said was hello. So him and my mom are sleeping. He hangs up the phone. Goes, puts his head back on the pillow. My mom's like, who was it? He's like, it was Jason. She's like, oh my God, is he okay? He goes, he's fine. He's fine. Life isn't fair. It's going to dish out hardship, whether you like it or not. And we all need to develop the armor to absorb that. Don't shield yourself or the people that you love from hardship. Life is hard. Don't kid yourself. It's okay that life is hard. I've told you guys this before. I can think of no greater endeavor than to improve another human being. Do not kid yourself into thinking that that is an easy task. It's hard. It's okay that it's hard. Do it hard. You will be a better person for it. You'll be stronger. The people around you will be stronger. And to think that we've somehow been able to put this team of people together that I trust with my life, quite frankly. Like, all of them are tough as nails, every single one of them. Why? Because they're okay with doing hard shit. Okay? Don't shy away from things that are hard. Okay? You're not doing anybody any favors. My senior year in high school, or in college, was rough. We were having an atrocious season. The coach got fired in the middle of the season, but they let him stay on. So you're like, great, worst case imaginable. Okay. And he and I had a lot of conflict. And I don't remember who sent me this book, but I do want to find out who sent me this book. I think it was actually my mom and dad's aunt and uncle. And it's a book by Pat Conroy called My Losing Season. First book I ever read, which probably explains my college transcript. And I was reading it, and it was eerily similar to what I was going through at the time. Like, I was like, this is my life. Like, this guy has been watching me for a year and wrote a book about it. Okay? It was eerily similar. Everything that he was going through with the conflict, what was going on with the team. And I talked to my dad a lot that season. And what he kept reminding me was like, hey, listen, that's the cards you got dealt. Okay? Your job is to keep the team together. And that was a really, really hard leadership role for me. Because every day we'd walk into the locker room, somebody was talking about quitting, they were bitching about the coach. It was just bad. Okay? And every day I had to get my shit together, walk in there, and rally the troops. I'm like, it's gonna be fine, let's get to practice, make sure you're there on time, right? And we did that for an entire season. Okay? One of the hardest things I've ever had to do was play the game that I love that was not going well with a bunch of people that were just hating life. Okay? And here's what I learned. Leadership isn't about awards or accolades. It will be lonely, and much of it is not fun. True leadership is about being who others need you to be in times of despair. And I think about the correlation to that in affiliates, and think about when a lot of people walk into your doors, a lot of them are there because things are not going well. Okay? You're gonna have problems with your team and your staff when like you need them to be the best versions of themselves. And you've got your own shit going on. Okay? Remember what your role there is. You have to be who they need you to be in that moment. And that might be the calm person. It might mean you need to tell them to get their head out of their ass. Okay? But I think a lot of people have a jaded view of like, hey, I'm gonna start this business, everybody's gonna love me, the members are gonna give me more money than I could ever imagine, right? The staff are gonna wanna work for free. And you get in there and you're like, that's not how this works at all. Okay? Okay? And just understand, it's not always supposed to be fun, right? It's not what you signed up for. Remember, this is hard. But I will tell you, it is absolutely worth it because of the impact that you get to make. It's absolutely worth it. On the hardest days, I still never regret doing any of this. And there's been some hard ones. Okay? When I do not want to go into the affiliate, I do not want to sit in front of the team. Do it anyway. So to recap, keep walking. Learn to guide yourself. Just show up. Be resourceful. Own your deficiencies. Play out of your league. Tell people the truth. Play to win. Take the hard path. Be the leader that people need you to be. So those are just some of the lessons. Now, moving forward, how do those lessons plus your identity make that ripple that we talked about earlier go further? Okay? Because you have to understand how these two are intertwined. And it's not an insignificant marriage. So I'm going to throw it back to my man, Joel Cochran, cowboy hat and all. Talked last year about identity. What is it, Joel, 25 miles an hour? 27 miles an hour riding that horse into a fence, okay? Because identity is a really big part of this. Okay, it's a really big part of this. So I'm going to tell you guys a little bit of story. This is a 20-year story I'm going to tell you. And I titled the story 2.11, a hero wad, and my 80-year-old self. That is my college transcript. You can't really see it, but at the bottom there it says 2.11. So those of you that didn't go to college, it's not good. Okay, it's not good. And the reason I show you guys that is, I'll walk you guys through an identity shift that I've had. So when I was at the Naval Academy, prep school, and even the supply corps school, so that, call it 6-year period, I went to 6 academic review boards. That's a lot. Okay. I had graduated with a 2.11. At one point, I was 1,012 out of 1,018 academically. So you can see why I was kind of identifying as somebody who's not smart. You're like, well, it says I'm not smart, right? Many people have told me that I'm not smart. Okay. When I was at prep school, when I went to the first academic review board, one of the department heads looked me square in the eye. She's like, you will never graduate this institution. Like, bet. I won't finish at the top, but just to spite you, lady, I'm going to get out of here. Okay. So that was an identity that I took on for many, many years, almost 2 decades. Right around 2005, I met this gentleman right here. How many of you guys have done the Marston workout? So Blake was a member of my gym for years. He's a gigantic ginger, by the way. He's huge, okay? Also one of the nicest human beings I've ever been around in my life. He's a member for years, really close friend. He lived a couple hundred yards behind me. He'd always end up in my backyard with his dog, Clara. And on January 10th in 2015, he had a tragic parachute accident and died when he was at SEAL Team 6. Okay. Devastating. After that, became very good friends with his mother, Nancy. Every year since then, she comes into Virginia Beach. She comes in for the memorial, like around Memorial Day. She calls me. She's like, hey, let's do dinner. About 2 years ago, my wife, Jess, was gone. She was deployed to Africa. So I call up Nancy. I'm like, hey, it'll just be me. Like, I got to get a babysitter for the kids. And we go out to have a couple drinks. Fantastic lady. And we're at dinner, and we're kind of joking around and having a good time. And I do what I normally do, is I kind of make a joke about being a dummy. And she got really mad at me, right? Like, she was angry. She's like, you need to stop saying that. And I was like, I know. And she grabbed my hand, and she goes, no, you need to promise me that you're going to stop saying that. And outside of marrying my wife, I don't know that I've made a bigger promise to anybody. Okay. I was like, well, that's not one I can break. Last week when Jay and I were in Colorado, we walked us through this exercise. It's like, hey, you fast forward into the future, you get to meet your 80-year-old self. What advice is your 80-year-old self going to give you? So they had us all write everything down. They say, hey, write one word. I cheated, I used to. And what I came up with was, keep going. Keep going. Walk into this room, it's my 80-year-old self. I'm like, hey, how's this all turn out? He said, great, as long as you keep going. Said everything that you want, it's done. As long as you keep going. The only reason you don't get to where you're going is if you stop. The only way you don't get to where you're going is if you stop. And for a lot of you guys, going through this identity shift is a big part of getting where you want to go. Right? You do not have to keep the identity that you currently have for yourself. And Joel's going to talk to you guys a lot about that. So 2 years ago, I decided to change mine. After that conversation with Nancy, I was like, I'm gonna make a change. And I told Jay and I told Marcus, I said, hey, I'm gonna do a thing. And for some of you grads, you guys know this, but you don't know the why behind it, because I told you guys last week. And Jay was like, okay, as Jay does. He's probably like, no, you're not. Marcus was the complete opposite. He was like, I actually don't think you need to do more things. All right? And I was like, okay, I'm gonna go do it anyway. Because it's kind of how I roll. I'm like, yeah, whatever. What's the worst position I can put myself in? I'll take that route. Okay. So I decided to change all of that. All right? I was like, hey, and what I decided is like, I have to kill the dummy. That identity can no longer exist. It is not going to allow me to get where I need to go. And it had to be pretty aggressive for me. So when I told the guys on the grad call, I told them about it, but I didn't tell you guys why. And that's actually the important part. So I went through that whole process, and then last month, I got accepted at Harvard Business School. Okay. So I told Jay, he's like, I didn't think you were going to do that. I forgot. And I was like, I know you did. And I said, hey, don't tell anybody. He's like a good partner, because Jay's actually a great partner. He's like, okay. About 2-3 weeks ago, I was laying in bed, and I was like, you are so full of shit. You are so full of shit. And what I had come to the conclusion was like, getting into Harvard Business School was not the hard part. The hard part was telling people. The hard part was standing in front of people and be like, hey, I did something I set out to do, and that old version of me no longer exists. And when I told you guys that last week, that was the first time I told anybody outside of like a very small cohort of people. My parents don't even know. Okay. And that's what I want you guys to consider. Who you are now is not who you need to be go where you want to go. And for some of you, that identity shift is going to have to be aggressive. You're going to have to really get uncomfortable. You're going to have to fundamentally change who you are. You're going to have to hang out with different people. You're going to have to stop doing certain things. Okay? Most people won't understand what it is that you're trying to do. You're going to feel weird. That's okay. If that's where you're at, you're probably heading in the right direction. Keep going. So going back to the ripple, what does all this mean? I say this at the end of every seminar I have the fortune to lead. And I talk about the ripple. And the ripple is this. When you're done doing this CrossFit thing, nobody's going to give a shit what your Fran time is. Nobody's going to care what your back squat. Nobody's ever going to ask you any of those things. What they will care about is that when they walked into the affiliate that day, scared out of their mind, because they're making a huge change for themselves, what they're going to care about is you walk up and say, hey, Dario, I'm really glad you're here, dude. I'm going to change your life. That's what they're going to care about. Understand what it is that we are doing here. Yes, we want you to have successful businesses, but it is way bigger than that. Okay? If you focus on the people, right, you continue to get better, you will be able to have an impact on such a massive scale that I couldn't possibly explain to you. And I think back at the people that I've met, the experience that I've had, the things that I've done. If you'd have told me that 15 years ago, I'd have been like, you've lost your mind. There's no way. There's no way that we stand in front of 150 affiliate owners with the team that we have. I'm like, that's not possible. It is possible. You guys can have that impact. Now, I don't think my dad was thinking about how it would impact future people when he was crossing the Rio Grande, right? Nobody told them like, hey, your journey is going to change other people's lives. But as I was thinking about that, I said, what if somebody did tell you that when you were going through it? What if somebody told you like, hey, I know it sucks, but you're going to change people's lives. Keep going. What if you knew that at the beginning when you set out on the journey? How would you live your life? How hard would you work? How would you show up differently? Well, today I told you, and now you know. So the only question now is, what's your 80-year-old self going to tell you about the ripple that you made in the world? What's it look like? When you meet your 80-year-old self, what I envision is I walk in and he says, I'm waiting for you to get here, dude. Nice job. Nice job. None of you had any idea before you got here today that you've been coached by my dad, right? Well, you have been, through me. Right? And he didn't know that he was coaching any of you guys, right? But he has been. Okay? And what you're all doing here, that is the ripple. You don't always have to know what's going forward. All you have to know is that by one tiny action done time and time again, that will go forward. Okay? And it can go really far. Really far. You can have impact that you guys couldn't possibly imagine. So, because of that, you guys didn't know any of that. I thought it'd only be fair to introduce you guys to my dad. Come up here.
Killing me.
I love you. Thanks. I made it all the way through that without crying, by the way. When I was putting this together, I put this in here because I really want to set the tone for this weekend. Like I really wanted to hammer home like what it is that we are doing here and why, okay? And that's just a small example of this whole thing, okay? And I really wanted to hammer home because I know this job can suck. I know it's hard, okay? I know that there are days when you're just like, is this the right thing? Did I really quit my job to do this? Okay. Understand the impact that you can have on people, okay? It's not always obvious. It's not always gonna be right in front of you, but understand that, again, this is really important shit, okay? Really important stuff, okay? I love you guys. Thank you guys for being here. Thank you guys for taking the time out, putting yourself out there, being vulnerable. People like you are what fundamentally changes the world. Don't ever forget that. It's gonna be a great couple of days. Once you guys drop those tears, go to the bathroom, we're gonna get moving on this, okay? Yeah, thank you, I appreciate that. So, thank you guys. We have a fantastic 2 days ahead for you guys. It's gonna be awesome and the fuel for what you guys are doing moving forward. Thank you guys for listening. I love you guys. I'll see you guys over the weekend.
If you are struggling with building your team, running the administrative portion of your gym, or just don't know what to do with regard to your strategy, that is exactly the things that we help people with inside of Affiliate University. So if you're trying to build a better box so that you can provide more impact to more people via this thing called CrossFit, we'd love to help you. So click the link somewhere around this video, set up a call, and we'll chat with you soon.